Lee, thank you so much for jumping onto the security space. I am looking forward to this one because when we pieced it together, it was not a lot of planning, but we're just gonna have we're gonna get it all out. We're gonna get a nice little therapy session going and bust some infosec myths. But before we do that, just like all the other podcasts, you're right. Just give us a quick introduction to yourself and a bit about your journey, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So currently I'm head of cybersecurity and data protection at View International. So View International is the group entity to what probably your listeners are most familiar to, View Entertainment, which is a cinema operator in the UK, and then we've got a European footprint with various cinema operators that work within the group element. So that's my current role. My journey was actually pretty unconventional, really, to be honest with you. I would say left school. Knew that was the end of my my academic patience, I suppose is the best way to put it, right? I wasn't studious, I wasn't academic, and so we moved into an apprenticeship in construction of all things, which is bizarre as well, really, because I was really into computers and tech and all the rest of it, building my own computers, messing around with ISDN, and then when I went ADSL and all the bits and pieces. But yeah, so went into construction, and then very quickly, after a few years, the financial crash started. So 2007, 2008, construction industry got hit pretty bad, and it was a bit of a pivotal moment then to decide, what am I going to do? I don't really like what I'm doing. I like tech to a certain degree, so let's do that. So then I ended up joining the armed forces. So went forward with them to be communication systems engineer. So it's a good foundational course what the military teaches you, because clearly they're handling sensitive information. Really interesting sort of landscape that they operate in, for obvious reasons. And without going into too much detail, spent 10 years sort of bouncing around the world doing some weird and wonderful things within the defense sector, around technical and cybersecurity and information security avenues, and then finished up there. Had tier medals, got what I needed to get out of that experience, and then decided to come back to reality. Stayed doing. Then I went back into more engineering, technical roles, so security network engineering, things like that, which is good grounding for a couple of years, really get into the weeds of some stuff, and then an opportunity came back home in Manchester, in retail of all things. I never thought I'd be in retail, but this was all propelled from the GDPR sort of frenzy in 2016-17. Like, what does this mean? We need to do something, yada yada yada. So it ended up there. Then sort of from that point made way into senior management. I've done consulting roles, and here I am today at View on another journey.
Nice. Before we get into it, just because I know it's always a very hot topic, is how did you actually find that that switch from moving from the military back into sort of civil world and getting that job? Because there's a lot of people that I speak to as well. It's just like getting that crossover. You think it'd be easy because you've done all these great things, very impactful as well in the sector, but not as easy as that. In reality. So how did you find it?
No, it isn't easy, and I think most of the guys and girls who I've come across, and then talking from personal experience as well, where we struggled mainly is culture. It's just a huge culture shock, right? You're from an environment where it's full of friends and comradeship, and the team is only as strong as the weakest link, right? So you come from high performing teams that are like galvanized and built on trust. And actually, if you really boil it down to worst case scenario, you're implicitly trusting them with your life, in some situations. So you don't really find that anywhere else in society. Maybe in family, in the family sort of setup, but certainly not in a professional setup. So I think some guys and girls do struggle with the culture more than anything else. You can feel quite isolated. You can feel vulnerable, I would say, as well, because it's the big wide world and you are on your own. You haven't got that team of brothers and sisters around you to support you on that journey. And an interesting one I found as well is the private sector and say defence. They look at information security, cybersecurity, IT very differently. So from my experience in the defence sector, what we would call information security, in the outside, is IT. It's IT 101 on the inside. So when you talk about segmentation, separation, compartmentalization of data, and defense in depth, I mean, some of these terminologies come from the military anyway, right? It isn't really seen and coined as cyber or information security. That is kind of just IT best practice, and in its very essence, actually, when you boil it down, it is, isn't it? So private, I found, and a lot of colleagues that I've spoken to in the past do find that very strange, that you'll have it's a healthy tension between CISO and CIO, isn't it? CIO builds something, but then it's another person's responsibility to make sure it's safe. Whereas you look at a builder who's building a house, they don't just do what they want and then someone else secures it. It's all built to a standard, isn't it? So that's an interesting sort of dynamic and split that I see. And then true cyber in the defense sector is really your offensive security stuff, to be honest with you. That's where there's the marked difference. So yeah, I think it's that. It's just a different cultures, completely different cultures.
Okay. Yeah, no, just because, like I say, it's very, very prevalent in the industry, and the amount of people that they have all this experience, but they just struggle to get in that job. But then obviously once they've got that ladder and they've got that year, it tends to be around after that. But yeah, topic, but we'll part that for another day, because we need to get some dirty laundry out, and we need to bust some InfoSec myths. So the first one I want to throw at you is around certifications and security. And that's the first one. So obviously a bit of background to why I chose that one for the first one is because amount of people that will just rush out the blocks and go aim for the CISP, aim for the CISMs, aim for the CEH. Not saying that they're bad qualifications by any means. They're clearly not. But when you rush out and do it, what's your initial thoughts when there's no thought behind doing it, and there's different angles to take it off, but I'll let you do your initial thought on what sort of certifications in the industry are like in this present day.
Yeah, so I think there's a definitive split between technical and non-technical, right? So CISP is a good, it's a management qualification. It's a general sort of overview of information security. Whereas some more technical certifications, you think of anyone who's going through any pen testing or hacking sort of courses, that technology landscape changes so rapidly that it probably bears more practical use, in that sense. So I look at certification very differently in terms of what one's more management governance, one's more sort of technical ability, and therefore I think you would look at them differently in terms of does the individual really need them. My personal, just very, my headline personally, I don't think it's necessary. I'm going to say it's not necessary. You don't need them. Full stop. There are sectors that require some kind of certification to, maybe from a liability perspective, to demonstrate some competences in a certain field, but from a professional aspect, it certainly doesn't mean anyone is more capable than another person. And actually, another thing as well is looking at it like the place, where you are in your journey, where you are in your career, right? Why would we really go and get certifications? It's one of two things: to learn a new skill. Well, if you've been in the game for a while, if you've been in senior management for a while in information security and cyber, do you really need to get a CISP? You've probably been around the block at that point, and you've got that experience. But similarly, if you're at the very, very start of your journey, how else can you demonstrate with a lack of experience? How else can you demonstrate your capability and competency, right? So I think the further down your career you go, same with anything, it's going to be less relevant. But then early on, I think some people use it to maybe peacock a little bit. You know, look what I've got. Look what I can. Look what I can do. And actually, that's not. You know, you passed an exam, which I can't do. I'm terrible at exams, by the way. You know, that's one of the main reasons I swerve. I said earlier about not being very academic. I just can't do exams, right? So I'm not saying that these things are easier, but what I am saying is I don't necessarily believe there's a criticality on them for someone to be capable of doing their job. And it's a shame sometimes when you see that in recruitment and on CVs. I think we can be scaring away a lot of good talent. It can even myself, I look at some of the things that are on some job descriptions and I think, I've not got a master's, I've not got this, that, and the other. So it can be quite intimidating. I think certainly for someone who's quite early on in that sort of career ladder.
And no, I completely agree, and there's a couple of things I'll say here. One is I think again it's quite frustrating the amount of it's is double-edged sword the right saying? Maybe not. I'll say it, then you might be able to correct me. Is a sense of like there's people in the industry that have got certs coming out their ears. Like I look at CVs. Obviously, we're being a cyber recruiter, and it's like wow, yeah, they got all this, got that, all that. But then when you speak to him, it's like it's just not coming through, and then you like they have their interviews, and it's like yeah, the CV read perfectly, but it just didn't come out. It didn't translate. It's all theoretical. And then, like you say, you've got the other side of it where you might like look at CV and then like, oh, they haven't got the certs, but wow, they've done this, they've done that, they've done like all these experiences. And to the latter audiences, I'd say that like if they just had the time to sit down and do the exam, they probably would have it. So which then kind of devalues it a little bit, 'cause it's like what are they proving? Like they've got the experience, they've got the knowledge. Surely that should be enough. And that is probably a nice segue into skills gap. And obviously, it's like with the skills gap, it's like I'll say my 2 pence on this, so buckle in, Lee, because like I've said it on another pod, so I need to be careful not to always keep saying it. But I firstly hate the term gap. I think I just don't agree with it. But I do understand the ideology behind it. I think for years we've been on a slippery slope of a big game of Chinese whispers, and essentially I think that it's originally job specs have been written by CISOs, heads of very senior people in security, fine, perfect, but then in organizations it then sometimes has to go to the, like you say, the CIO, or it might need to go to the chief of people, then it goes to the talent team, and then it goes out. And through them different layers, I think something has gone on, like Chinese whispers. Like at the start, you might have said like CISP is nice or CH is nice, but like not important. But through all the different layers and through all the people maybe not understanding the cyber technical jargon, they've gone to a cert and be like, right, they need to have that because people in HR or talent who aren't in the cyber field, it's how to say it respectfully, it's like something that they can quickly tick off when they see it on a CV, and therefore it's a quick win for them. And I think then that has sort of gone out into the wider world now over this past decade, where it's like something that wasn't as valued at the start or something that isn't, all the values have changed on a CV, and as such the candidates aren't coming back through the system because it's all been muddled around. I think that's what's happened personally, and I think it'll take a long time to fix that error. That's my view.
I totally agree. And I think when you talk about skills gap, well, what skills? Because to be frank, I think we focus quite a lot on the technical skill set, right? Which is important. Clearly, you're working in a very technical sector. But I think one of the most crucial things is I said it before about my time in the military, is the right behaviors. Being in information security and cyber security, sometimes you have to say, you have to deliver quite negative news, whether it's an IT project or it's a situation, an event, an incident, whatever it may be. And you have to be really robust. Sometimes you can be quite isolating because You know, you're doing. What was it? Someone said to me, the hardest thing to do is do the right thing on a difficult day, right? So
Okay.
you could be in a situation where it's all just going to pot, or there's a project that's late in which you need to get it across the line, and you're going to have to put your hand up maybe at some point and say,
Mm.
actually, you know, a bit of moral courage and integrity, we're going to have to delay it 4 more weeks because we've got this to do or that to do, whatever. So my point is, I'm just using that little example, is that we sometimes focus, when we talk about skills, we focus too much on, I think, the wrong skills. And getting back to this, and it segues, dovetails really nicely back into the certification piece, right? Because that's all about, to be perfectly frank, it's being lazy to a certain degree. You do a job description, you say, I want these certifications, and if you haven't got them, I'm not interested, right? Actually, what would be more beneficial to both parties is maybe going through spending the time doing a technical interview, a list series of questions, then giving them the opportunity to demonstrate their experiences and their capabilities, rather than just. So I do think that sometimes it is done, it's laziness. It's done, and it's done for efficiency more than anything else. And like you said, it doesn't really demonstrate the true competencies and capabilities of individuals. So yeah, there probably is a skills gap, but it isn't a supply and demand issue. I think you've got plenty of people out there that are available and willing to work. I used to say to my staff, certainly the graduates and the more junior staff members, is that there are 1,000 people out there that would give their left arm to be in your seat. Loads of people want to pile into cyber, for various reasons. So, that there's your incentive to keep working hard, right? So I think, I do think that we have a problem in filling vacancies, but there's various things behind it, and also as well, getting back to job descriptions, I could be writing something that is completely inappropriate or just a complete turn off for somebody else, right? When we start looking about sort of binary sort of job descriptions and all this sort of stuff, you can be inadvertently sort of not advertising to everyone. You're advertising to a particular demographic, for example, and you could say, "Oh, I'm only getting so many candidates." It's like, well, because the marketing of your job, your marketing, the job description, it's not targeting a wider audience. So yeah, I agree. There's a skills, there's a shortage of people filling vacancies, but it's not because there's a skill gap or a skill shortage.
It's process reasons.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
And an interesting point on that, from the recruitment world, is to take it one step further on that process front, and this leads very nicely into not just women in securities, but women in tech in general. Is that guys being guys? There is studies out there that says they only need to hit 20% of a job spec for them to whack in a job application. Whereas with women, if they don't meet at least 80%, i.e., they're fine if they don't hit 20%, then they won't apply. Just simply at the start line. So they need to hit minimum 80%. And if it's going off what we've just said there, with the fact that it's just not being processed right, then there's no wonder that there's a massive sort of lack of females in security and technical roles, just based on that. So yeah, they've not got a cat in house chance based on what we've discussed.
It's totally, mate. And I think one thing you see from, again, this is my background in the defence sector. When you're going through as a recruit, it's like the bash street kids. It's just all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life. But that diversity really gives the team like a different perspective on how to overcome a problem. Whereas if you have, revision 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the same person, it's a very singular lens to look at a problem through, and you can be restricting the sort of the level at which the team could potentially perform at, right?
That's it. Your team then get affected from it, because like you say, if you just have yes men, I think that's a nice way of actually putting it together, because they're all very, very similar. Your team will be limited because you need people from different backgrounds, different experiences, because with security, it's constantly adapting. There's no one right fix for everything, because what was right yesterday might not be right tomorrow, and therefore having that different sort of like background is very important. So I think, yeah, it's actually quite worrying looking at it, because I haven't got a fix apart from getting processes right, but I can't fix that, and I think that'll be like at least a 5-10 year journey for that to even
Yeah,
get right.
yeah, I think so. I mean, let's not be, overly critical of ourselves. Like this is not isolated to tech or cyber or anything. This is definitely I think this is a hot topic in general in the whole workforce, right? Isn't it? The availability of any job to any individual.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
No, exactly. Cool. So, just change course a little bit, and just throw another sort of little myth at you.
Yeah.
Why does the outside world only see cyber as these hackers? What's kind of gone on there, and why is there no appreciation for it? People don't even realize about like information security, the auditors, all the GRC stuff that goes on behind that. Why is that?
This I think what I was discussing earlier in terms of when I was in the military, cyber, doing information security in an internal environment wasn't seen as information security; it was seen as IT. So I think
Yeah.
if you ask someone anywhere else in the business outside of the tech department, they'd say, "Oh, we've got a cyber individual who's making sure that we're safe and secure." I think the challenge would be, well, why don't you just build it safe and secure in the first place, right? And
Yeah.
you see this methodology of secure by design, and it's like, well, shouldn't that just be best practice? Shouldn't we just do them to this particular standard? So I do think there's we don't help ourselves in that regard, because like you say, you've got the internal guys, the GRC guys, security architects, so on and so forth, who are effectively making sure we build our IT environments to a particular a robust standard. And then in terms of then this is the interesting dynamic. Then we start getting into like black hat, white hat, grey hat, and the more technical elements is, well, how realistically, how much of a demand is there for those capabilities to actively go and hack something? I think there's more of a demand to secure the castle rather
Yep.
than to go and do an infiltration exercise on someone
Nice.
else's castle. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so yeah, I think it's I get it. I think I get it from a if you just take your tech hat off for a second, I think it's just common sense, isn't it? But
Yep.
why do you need to be told to build something securely? Why does someone need to check that? Should it not just be happening anyway? And they're not. And I guarantee there's a lot of information security and cyber guys out there going, yeah, I wish it was. Well, actually, if it was, then we'd all be out of a job, wouldn't we? So maybe if you don't do it, if they're not so diligent, that helps me and my peers out. But yeah. So I would think it was something along those lines.
Okay, yeah, no, it's a good way of putting it. Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned there, sort of like secure by design, and like, yeah. So obviously, why do sort of, and again, I might be wrong, but why do developers, yeah, I'm calling them out, why do developers get all the time, get all the budget, get all the resource when it comes to sort of projects? I speak like that. But yeah, and then the security guys are often led to come in at the end and just kind of fix something with a little plaster. Why are we not bringing the security guys in from the get-go? I don't get um, what the thinking behind it is, because I don't think it's any more money. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it just will, and it's actually quite a mature posture if you've got your security teams working in synchronicity with the rest of the departments, i.e. the developers when working on projects. What's your thoughts on all that?
I think it's like look at football teams. Strikers are paid more than goalkeepers,
Yeah.
right? You look at Formula One history. They didn't have seatbelts on the car because it slowed the car down. So I think it's more of a behavioral mindset of a business that has a team of developers in there. It's because they are, doing something. So if you talk about retail, for example, they're doing something with a product to help enhance that product to maybe sell more of them.
Right.
And then visually within an organization, there is a tangible return on that investment. Whereas you put airbags and all sorts of these safety functionalities, seatbelts into a car, but what's the point in them if you may never have a crash, right? So I think there's again, it's same with, like I was saying with the football analogy. It's kind of like the goal is a tangible thing. It's like you see it, feel it, and it's like,
I see that,
it. Whereas like a goalkeeper can make 5 or 6 saves and someone else will probably get man of the match. So I think it's that, and this is where we get that sort of analogy I'm giving there is very much why I talk about when I was talking earlier about behaviors instead of just the technical mindset, it's the behavioral mindset as well, because you're not always going to be in the limelight. Very rarely, actually, you'll be in the limelight. If you do your job perfectly, you'll never have an incident or an event to deal with.
Yeah.
But then you'll never have a chance to shine. And then even if you had this ransomware event and you managed to quarantine and contain it and save the day in very real terms, but why did that happen in the first place?
Yeah.
What went wrong there? So you're in this juxtaposition, right? So I think whereas developers and engineering teams and stuff like that, unless you miss a deadline or whatever, all you're doing is enhancing the status of the product that you're trying to develop, right? So I think it's more of that tangible thing. And then I think second thing is, again, there is a cultural aspect of security professionals being a bit of a handbrake. And I think this goes back to like 20 years ago when you'd have a change, really sort of robust change control process, and then it gets to this is why you get the terminology shift left, because the security guy was always the last person to consult and say, well, this, that, and the other. And I think it's just sort of historical how people sort of see security, whereas actually now, this is why we're talking about that shift left and secure by design, model of least functionality and the model of least privilege and all these sorts of things. If you get them at the start, it's not really an issue. It doesn't delay anything. It doesn't diminish the MVP or the product itself. And then there's no delay. So yeah, so I think it's a combination of things, really, to be honest with you. But it's that's sometimes incredibly frustrating for a security professional.
Yeah, because you kind of like, you want to be the celebrity, but you'll be the celebrity for 5 minutes, and then people will be like, hold on a minute. Okay, so how did we even get to that point? Like, once the issue's solved, like, we shouldn't have even got to that. So it's a really interesting point.
And I think as well, I remember saying to my team during the pandemic, when a lot of furlough was going on, and I don't know. I've not met one yet, actually, but there wasn't many security professionals that got furloughed, right? Because you had to keep the operations going. The machine needed to keep turning, and it needed
everyone
to be
working from home, doing
safe and secure. Yeah,
networks.
Exactly. Whereas because money was a little bit tighter, developing new things was actually a bit more of a luxury and maybe not a must-have. So for me, I remember during that period sort of trying to emphasize and highlight to my security teams, in terms of you are playing a quietly significant role here, and what is happening now is speaking volumes.
Well, I think, when push comes to shove, i.e. the pandemic, it was the security teams that were still there keeping the lights on, weren't it? So it's
exactly.
It's one of them jobs, isn't it? You can't really shout about it, but yeah, it's very important. But
you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
It's a perfect way of sort of summarising. But no, Lee, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this one. I think there's so much more we can sort of go into as well. Absolutely. So, but yeah, any sort of questions for Lee, just like all the other pods, I'll get the contact information into the description bit of this video. But once again, Lee, thank you so much for jumping on the Security Space.